Hello, everyone. This is a presentation regarding Trayvon Martin and what happened that night. My name is Marcel Elvers, Master Profiler through written communication. I use handwriting analysis, statement analysis, and behavioral trend analysis. I finished my book, JonBenet, the final chapter, and is now available on Amazon. And no, I'm not going to write a book about George Zimmerman and Trayvon Martin. This is the iconic photo we all remember Trayvon Martin by. A young kid with a hoodie on that looks into the camera with no malice. Please like my channel, above all share with others and subscribe so you can get the follow-ups on the Trayvon Martin case. Trayvon Martin died at age 17 at the hands of a gunshot wound by George Zimmerman. Zimmerman was actually injured during the altercation with Martin, and he said he shot Martin in self-defense. That in itself was interesting. But the evidence shows, and especially the police narrative written by George Zimmerman, that George was the aggressor. George Zimmerman also lied, blatantly lied about what happened. And Zimmerman's recollection of events did not match his police narrative. As a handwriting analyst, I looked at the handwriting of George Zimmerman on his police narrative. Of course, the handwriting is shaky. He just killed somebody, not an everyday event. And George Zimmerman was shaken. And that is understandable. So I'm not going to make too many comments regarding that. There is, however, a very significant trade in his handwriting. When you look at T of direction, and then the H stem of the following word, we see a sudden slant forward. And that feature, that characteristic, repeats itself throughout the police narrative. And that means that somebody has sudden emotional outbursts, that they are not able to control their emotions and how they react to situations. And so they tend to be touchy and overreactive. Another very interesting feature or characteristic of George Zimmerman's handwriting is that certain letters suddenly drop below the baseline. We see the A in arrived, the V and the D, and then the A in and again, but also the personal pronoun I drops below the baseline. And that is an indication of unpleasant, unconscious urges. Such individuals have uncontrollable urges. They need to do something and cannot control their behavior. This is an aggression indicator. This letter of the zodiac, or the zodiac killer, shows the same features. Again, uncontrollable urges. You see that in the slant of the word is, the I of is, and then the D in zodiac. In the word blood, you can see how the slant of the B, then the L a little bit forward, and the D a whole lot forward. Total loss of control and emotional overreactions. Several letters drop below the baseline. We can see that in the O of over, but also in the last downstroke of the K. These individuals have uncontrollable urges. And that does not mean that we know what they do with it. Just because somebody has that in their writing does not make him a killer. It just means that they are prone to overreacting and do things without being able to control themselves. That may be a yelling match. It could be drawing a gun. So do not make the mistake that just because you see in handwriting characteristics that you know what they do with it. So the Zodiac had uncontrollable urges, and we know that for a fact because he admitted to killing. Zimmerman also has uncontrollable urges, and we know that for a fact. We know that he smashed his girlfriend's iPad at the time, probably during a stressful time being up. That was just before his accusations in court date. So that is understandable, but yet he was unable to control himself. He also beat her up. That was also reported at the time. But that does not make Zimmerman a murderer, rather a person who has uncontrollable urges. Zimmerman was hurt, like we know, and like I said before, but he said that his head was busted against the concrete a dozen times. Well, that is very interesting because the number of wounds on the back of his head and the lack of bleeding does not match a dozen times. On top of that, he claimed that Trayvon Martin was sitting on top of him and grabbed him by the head and smashed his head against the concrete roughly a dozen times. Number one, there are not enough wounds. Number two, he would either be dead or at minimum unconscious. His narrative does not match the evidence. So we can see that he is lying right here. And of course, he is exaggerating because exaggeration is a tool to convince others. The harder they try to convince you, the more likely it is not true. In an interview, probably with ABC, he claimed that Trayvon Martin was sitting on top of him and spotted his gun. Now remember, he was sitting on top of him with both of his hands on his head, bashing it a dozen times into the concrete. That is what he says. But then subconsciously, while he was telling the story, he put his hand where his gun normally was located. And that is on his right back. So if he lays on his back with Trayvon Martin straddling him with both hands on his head, how on earth could Trayvon Martin spot his gun? That is likely another lie. The link for the YouTube is on the bottom if you want to look it up yourself. So this doesn't make sense. Right from the start, George Zimmerman is lying through his teeth. He's not telling the truth. So what we're going to do is that we will have a look at George Zimmerman's behavior, his police narrative, and his handwriting.